Speaking of getting the job done, our first guest is the Senate Education Chair, Senator Amy Grady. She joins us via telephone. Amy, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Rob. Thanks for having me. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Perfect.
Nice and strong. Yeah. So let's talk first and foremost about SB 705. And let me set this up from the perspective I get from the people that we interview in education. And this would come from elected officials to people who work in the school systems and those all around the fringes. So, and I'll also quote my friend John Gilstrap here as well. When it comes to education in the state, it's like nobody has the ultimate authority. So as a result, when we do interviews, everybody blames somebody else as to why education is the way it is in the state. Those elected to the legislature say, well, we don't have any oversight of the State Board of Education, so we can suggest things, but we can't make it happen. When we talk to somebody involved at the state level, they say, well, if we're not funded properly, we can't get it done. And then people with the unions and the teachers and whatever, it's everybody has somebody else that they point a finger to. It would seem that oversight of the State Board of Education, which the legislature wants, would be one way of eliminating one of those excuses. Correct or not correct, Senator Grady?
Well, I don't think it solves the problem, Rob. I think that the excuses will continue regardless. Because, I mean, if you think about how we do things currently, every Board of Education policy there is based on something in West Virginia code. And the legislature is who is responsible for passing laws that are in West Virginia code. So, it's a cycle of excuses, as you said. I did not support Senate Bill 705 yesterday, and it's not because I don't think there needs to be oversight. Back in 2022, when we had Amendment 4 on the ballot, I was a strong proponent of that and really worked hard to try to get people to support it, but the voters didn't. And so I felt like this bill was a way to circumvent what the voters chose already. I thought it sent a terrible message to our voters. I thought it was telling them, hey, you voted this down, but we're going to do it anyway. And I would prefer that we put the amendment back on the ballot by itself instead of with three others, because the last time there were 4 amendments on that ballot, and that was really confusing. But if we could put it back on the ballot by itself and do a lot of good education, I think the public might look at it differently. And that's just kind of where I stood on this because of that. I think it matters a lot in public opinion on how we view our voters. And when we put an amendment on the ballot in front of them and they vote it down, we really have to figure out exactly why that was and not just try to circumvent the process. Now,
my co-host, John Gilstrap, has some thoughts about those amendments. John?
Yes, good morning. I believe that was in May, right? That was voted on in 22? Was that on the May ballot?
Goodness, John, I can't remember if it was in May or if it was on the general election ballot.
I think it was on the general.
Was it the general?
Yes.
But in any case, we moved to West Virginia in March of 22. And so that was my first election cycle. And as I went through, sat in the ballot box, and I was trying to get involved in everything, Amendment 4 in particular, I write books for a living, and I have written books that are shorter than Amendment 4. It just went on and on and on. There was no identification of what the problem was, and then the legalese was like molasses. And ultimately, I voted no because I'm not going to vote for something I just simply don't understand. That was the problem. I don't think anybody, I think the majority of people who voted that down actually didn't vote down the idea. They just said, I have no idea what this is, and I'm not going to vote for it. So there's not a mandate against this any more than I think there was a mandate against the Amendment 2, which was the property tax amendment. It was just a word salad that was impenetrable at the end of a very long ballot. That was and frankly, I'm not casting aspersions here, but there was no publicity about this. There was no indication as a newcomer to the state. There was no indication of what problem I was supposed to be solving here. So that was the issue. I don't think there was a mandate against.
That was the issue to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
John, you must not have been listening to this show at that time, because it was talked about. Amendment 2 and Amendment 4 specifically were talked about quite a bit and debated.
Amendment 2 was talked about a lot.
Amendment 4 was also talked about quite a lot as well.
Indeed.
I mean, it wasn't. I have a different view of the publicity of it and the understandability of the West Virginia electorate, because this is the school unions they have a very wide microphone or a very wide base, and they were putting out information about it to their members almost daily. But well, you know what, Amy, Senator Grady, you're one of those. You are a school teacher. What did you think?
Mm-hmm. Well, on how it was handled, number one, I agree with John completely. It was not worded in a way that people could understand, and I really think we did a terrible job as a legislature at getting the point across. It's our job when we put an amendment on the ballot to try to educate the public the best we can. Number one, John was correct when he said that it looked like word salad. It was worded terribly. There's some research done that says if you send anything out to the public, that you need to have it on about a third grade level for people to completely understand it. And that's not saying that people are ignorant. It's just saying it needs to be very basic so people can understand what they're voting on. And those amendments weren't, especially Amendment 4. But the teachers' unions did come out really strongly against it, and they used fear tactics of, that it's going to take away funding and it's going to take away a lot of things that weren't true. And you know how people feel about that. If they start to wonder if something is true or if it's not, it's better. They feel like it's safer to vote no than to take a chance, especially if they don't understand something. So I said yesterday in my floor speech that I think we did a terrible job at educating the public on that amendment. And I agree that I don't think that they voted down the idea of it. I just think they didn't understand it completely, and we didn't do a good job of letting them know why it was important. And we really need to do that. And so if we had an opportunity to put it back on the ballot by itself, that would provide us with the ability to really work and educate the public on it.
And then Governor Jim Justice did a statewide tour against the amendments as well, and that with his
not that one.
With it, I think
we have a little saying around here say we got baby dogged. That's what we did.
Yeah, I think he went against all four.
Too.
I thought he went against all four.
So he was really against Amendment 2, but in when you look at that, everybody sees him coming out against Amendment 2, and then they 100% just vote against all of them because they didn't understand them. It's easier to say no to something if you don't understand it than it is to vote yes and not sure about what you're voting to change. So it falls on education.
How did the debate over SB 705 end yesterday?
We had some really good debate. It passed out 19-15. So it was a very close vote, and I think the majority of the people that voted against it were kind of feeling the same way I was, that it was a constitutional amendment, and that the voters didn't vote for it, and we need to try that again. But, it was a very close vote. I'm not sure how it's going to go in the House. The House has a similar bill, but ours is a little bit different. Senator Tom Willis, who introduced the bill, seems to think that this one would hold up a little better into the language than the House bill does. But, that's still, we're waiting to be seen on what's going to happen there.
Senator Grady, this is Matt, and what has happened in the 2 years legally that permits the legislature from being able to run a statute when 2 years ago we were told that it takes a constitutional amendment to change the law, and now it's a lot less than a constitutional amendment because, I'm also thinking about our state Supreme Court that recently, within the last 6 years, the voters chose to put them under the control of the legislature, and then 2 years ago we're like, well, you have to. This is the way we have to do to get the legislature to control, and now there's like, well, we were just kidding. I don't understand legally.
Well, that was also the question, Matt, was why did we need an amendment 2 years ago if we can just change code to make it happen? And I think it was 1984. It was in the 80s. There was a Supreme Court ruling that basically stated that the state board was not under the purview of the legislature. And so it's the thought process that this bill would have the Supreme Court take a relook at that. And possibly have a different ruling than was ruled back then. And so that's the whole thought process behind it. And I'm not comfortable with the idea of passing a bill that is going to go to the Supreme Court to be challenged, And so I just don't think that's a good way to do things. And so that's my understanding of it, is where it's a hopeful that the Supreme Court will change the ruling from the 80s. But again, that's not something that's guaranteed.
Where's Governor Morrissey on this? Do we have any idea?
I really don't know. He hasn't really spoken up about this at all. So or if he has, I haven't heard anything about it. So I'm not sure. I just, we heard the debate from senators on the floor yesterday, and I know House members, they didn't really debate it very long when they passed it out of their chamber. So I'm not really sure where a lot of people stand on it, except for the people in our caucus, because we discussed it quite a bit.
Senator Amy Grady, our guest on the program, Education Chair. Yesterday, when we spoke with the Finance Chair, Jason Barrett, he talked about a way to get teachers additional money who live in higher cost of living areas of the state. How did that go yesterday?
We passed it out of education, and then Senator Barrett changed it and had a new comm sub in finance, and we passed it out of finance. I'm really interested to see the discussion we have on the floor regarding this bill. It's past due for it. I'm a teacher, of course, and I'm all for teacher pay raises. I think every teacher works hard. But we really have to focus on, I like this because it's more of a business model. We have to focus on the market. Where are we needing teachers the most? And you guys in the Panhandle, I think like 60% of the classrooms in Berkeley County do not have certified teachers in them. And so, we're losing teachers to bordering states because they can go and make more money. And they have a higher cost of living than maybe counties that are around them that are West Virginia counties. And so it's only fair to make sure that our teachers that are living in those counties have a fair wage. And I think this is the fairest way to do it. And with that said, I teach in Mason County, and based on this projected market pay enhancement bill, right now I would get zero. And so, this isn't something that I'm looking at from a perspective of, all right, we got to hit some certain counties to make them have higher pay. This is looking at a perspective of where are our problems and how do we keep teachers in the classrooms where we really, really need them, where we're losing them a lot. And a lot of those bordering counties are the problems. And so I think this is a really interesting way to go about trying to take care of that issue.
Are you a member of either of the teachers' unions, Senator Grady?
No, sir, I'm not.
So when we have interviewed these folks in the past, Fred Albert, when he was in charge of AFT West Virginia, Dale Lee, who's still in charge of the West Virginia Education Association, initially we got the idea that they were against any type of what was called quote-unquote locality pay. Both have since kind of softened that a little bit, and Dale has been an advocate for increasing the local share as a way of giving teachers an opportunity to make more money. Have you ever looked into the financial model of that? I know at some point in the recent past that was changed to allow counties to keep more of the local share, but it would have to be changed pretty significantly in the Eastern Panhandle to get teachers to the kind of salaries that would stop them from jumping over the river or over the border to Maryland or Virginia.
Yeah, it would have to be changed. We're looking at changing a lot of the way things are funding. Number one, that school aid formula, which also deals with personnel, has a lot of issues that we really need to revamp and change. Unfortunately, that's something that has to take place over the course of a year or so. It's not going to take place in a couple of weeks. But I think we need to open our eyes and make sure that we're open-minded when it comes to looking at ways that we can enhance teacher pay. We want to make sure, I've even looked at a way we could do performance-based bonuses, because I think that we need to reward our teachers that are doing a really great job. When we look at private businesses or businesses in general that are successful, they reward their best employees. And I think we need to do that same thing with teachers. Not saying every teacher shouldn't have a livable salary, because we absolutely should, but those that are doing a really great job in the classroom really need to get something extra. So that's another thing I think we need to look at. We've got to try to break the mold of West Virginia being at the bottom when it comes to, number one, educational outcomes, but also teacher salaries. And so having an open mind is the number one thing. I think that's the biggest problem, is when you start talking about all these different types of things to look at to reward teachers, or to, this quote-unquote locality pay, the market pay enhancement, people start to get nervous and they say, this isn't fair. And I always tell my kids in my classroom, I teach fourth graders, when they start saying that, I say, no, fair is everybody getting what they need, not everybody getting the same thing. And I think we've got to change that.
When you talk about performance-based pay, that's kind of interesting. What string would you pull? Because I got to tell you, whatever teacher had little Johnny Gilstrap in their fourth grade classroom had to work a lot harder than teachers that had somebody else in their classroom.
And whatever talk show host has him as a co-host, it still applies, Amy.
So you're saying we should put rating measures on kids, and that's a bigger performance-based pay bonus if you have little Johnny Gilstrap in
Exactly.
there. Yeah, so that's the problem. Is I've researched it for the last year or so on how we could do that. Some states have tried it, and nobody's been really successful. Texas has some individual school districts that are doing it successfully, but it's permissive. So there are a lot of issues with it. Is how do you give a performance-based bonus based on? We don't want to just base it on test scores, because as a teacher, I know if I have a fourth grader comes into my classroom at the beginning of fourth grade and they're on a first grade reading level and they go to special education services for first grade, but they still have to take that fourth grade test at the end of the year, I know already they're not going to pass that, right? So, but if I get them from a first grade reading level to a second grade reading level in a course of a year, did I do my job? I believe so, because that's 1 year of growth in the year that I had them. So there are some measures we have to figure out, and I've been trying to do that, but I think it's so hard. One of the things that we had looked at before, Senator Tarr, the former finance chairman, and I had looked at before, was doing it based on school level. So you got every employee in that school to buy in to improving the educational outcomes of our students at that school level, including service personnel, and doing it a bonus based on the school level. That's one that we were kind of leaning towards. Still haven't figured out how to make it work, but I'm not going to give up on it, because I really think that it could help.
What about longevity? Would that be an important metric to include in that?
Oh, absolutely. But with the turnover rate in schools and things like that, and teachers leaving classrooms to go to other classrooms, how do you give a performance-based bonus on longevity? So all of these are good suggestions. It's just we can't really quite figure out how to get it to work and to work fairly, and that's the biggest problem. I always like to try to look at how other states do things, too, to get ideas to see, if they've been successful. So we don't, necessarily rewrite the wheel, but there are reasons, I guess, that other states have not been successful at it either. I have been in touch with the House Education Chairman in Texas about how they have done the districts, and we're in the process of looking at how to maybe try to lean in that direction.
Well, Senator, if you come up with a way like a market pay and it passes and it gets signed by the governor, could then the state school board superintendent just disregard it?
No.
How's that different than what we were talking about earlier?
No, they couldn't disregard it, because it takes into effect the salary schedule as well, but it has a multiplier. So it's very specific way to interpret whether, and it's yearly, so it's an annual market pay enhancement. So if the market changes within the year, it's reevaluated every year, and so that market pay enhancement could increase or decrease based on what the median home price is in that region.
Do you keep the gains you've locked in, or if there's some type of housing crash in your county, do you lose salary?
No, you keep the gains.
Gotcha. Now, go ahead, John.
And now all of this, let's say this happens, this all ties back into the $400 million deficit that the governor was talking about when we first started. Do we have the money for this?
That's one of those hard decisions you have to make. We have to look at things and decide what we are willing to spend and not spend. And that $400 million deficit that he's talking about was also thinking about that Hope Scholarship expansion, assuming that so many more kids were going to jump on board and use the Hope Scholarship. So that's also one of those numbers that we're looking at. So it kind of fluctuates a little. We're not exactly sure how many students are going to use the Hope Scholarship that's available to them, with an anticipation of considering that all about 40,000 that could use it would. You have to kind of use that as your calculation, but I highly doubt that we're going to have all 40,000 jump on board at one time to try to get the Hope Scholarship. So, so there's some flexibility there.
Senator Amy Grady, Education Chair, our guest here on the program. Final couple of minutes here. You're also on finance, as you mentioned, and health and human resources, too, which fits hand in glove with education. Amy, what's coming out of the Health and Human Resources Committee that's going to help kids in school?
Well, we've passed some bills out of Health Committee that deal with our foster care system and CPS workers. We are seeing more and more students in our public schools that are in foster care, and I think they come with their own set, different types of needs and issues that need to be addressed, and in some cases, our public schools don't have the resources to help these kids the best that we can. So we have some bills that are coming out to kind of help streamline information that comes along with foster kids, so that the schools and the people that are taking care of them have all the information available so we can help those kids the best that we can. I think those are really important. We've got some more coming from the House. I'm not sure what will pass exactly because there's some differences in some of the bills, but we have 3 or 4 bills that deal with foster care. And I think that's really important simply because, like I said, we're seeing an influx of kids in our foster care system that are in our public schools. And in order to make sure that they're successful, we need to make sure we can reach them in whatever way that they need.
We had an interview with the school counselor of the year out of Jefferson County recently, and she mentioned the fact that legislatively some of the duties counselors perform were cleaned up and more streamlined by the legislature not too long ago. And the unforeseen consequences of that resulted in less counselors because school districts needed to hire people to do some of the jobs counselors used to do that took away from their counseling jobs. Has that problem been addressed at all in the legislature, Amy?
We do have a bill to address that, and that was last year, actually, Rob.
Okay.
And when we were talking about that bill, clarifying the duties of counselors, I actually said this can cause some issues and possibly have us lose some counselors because we are saying they can only do specific duties. And that's exactly what has happened. So now we have a bill this year that says that you need to have one counselor for every 250 students. And so, that's in an effort to help make sure that we have enough counselors in all of our school systems. I'm hoping that we can get it across the finish line. I'm not 100% sure. The House has already passed it. I plan on running it next week, so we'll see how that helps. And it should. But our counselors do so much more, and I think when we get down to talking about specific duties they need to do, the intent was to say we don't want them taking care of class schedules when they don't need to. We don't want them doing things that like secretarial work. We wanted them to focus on being counselors, and that's important, but we also have to look at the local schools and the local school districts. Every school is different, and so local control is really important. I teach at a school that has 100 kids pre-K through 6th grade, and we have elementary schools that have 500 kids. The needs in those two schools are completely different, and so letting the school decide what that counselor needs to do, I think, is really, really helps. So this would help to make sure we put them back in the schools where they need to be.
Senator Grady, thank you so much for your time this morning. As always, greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Rob. You guys have a good day.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.